So our next speaker is Dr. JoAnne Arcand. Dr. Arcand is an assistant professor in the Faculty of Health Sciences at Ontario Tech University. She's a registered dietitian and graduated with a PhD in nutritional sciences in the Department of Nutritional Sciences at the University of Toronto. She subsequently completed postdoctoral training in public health nutrition policy. Dr. Arcand has research experience in clinical and population health aspects of nutrition and cardiovascular disease prevention and management. Her research program is examining the implementation of nutrition recommendations in primary care, evaluating novel tools for the dietary management and prevention of hypertension and heart failure, designing and evaluating mobile nutrition education apps for school-age children in Ontario, and evaluating policies to reduce population sodium intakes in both Canada and Latin America. So Dr. Arcand, take it away.
Okay, so thank you for inviting me here tonight. So I can actually jump off of the last slide as sort of a theme for my talk being, you never know what tomorrow will bring. I saw that quote on your slide, and I feel like that has been my career trajectory because I never expected to be doing the job that I have now. So I literally got my first real job about 5 years ago. So a lot of my discussion tonight is going to be about how I made certain decisions along the way and what ultimately led me to be doing what I am doing now. So I started out with the surprise to my parents because I had never really stepped foot in a kitchen before, going to Western University and doing a degree in human ecology. It's a Bachelor of Science, specialization in food and nutrition. And really the objective was to become a dietitian. So by the end of my program, my goal, my dream job would have been to be a clinical dietitian working with patients with gastrointestinal diseases. So I set off to complete a dietetic internship. So just after I finished my undergrad in 2001, I headed to Mount Sinai Hospital where I completed approximately a 10-month internship program, finished in 2002. And while I was at Mount Sinai, and what is common in internship programs is that we complete a research project. And my research project was actually a randomized controlled trial, believe it or not, to be completed in 10 months, which didn't happen, where we were looking at implementation of dietary guidelines. So does counseling by a dietitian in a heart failure clinic actually help patients reduce their sodium intake better than usual care, which at that time was typically handing them a brochure and telling them to reduce their sodium intake. And my supervisor at that time was Dr. Gary Newton, and Gary and I got on really well. And throughout my internship program, I worked really hard on this research project. I loved it. The team was incredible, but I didn't quite finish. Because it's a randomized controlled trial and I only had 10 months to do it. So I was lucky enough that after I completed my internship program, I was actually seen as a little bit of a food service superstar when I was during my internship because I had 3 solid summers working in food service organizations. And to your point, it doesn't hurt to get your hands dirty. And every year during the summers, I would be given more and more responsibilities. So when I got to Mount Sinai, they were really impressed with me and they were able to keep me after on a contract role. And I saw this is my opportunity to stay until a clinical position opened up. And I knew that was likely going to happen. There's going to be a clinical position opening up in either GI or ICU, and so which are both rotations that I loved during my internship. So during this administrative role, I got to do a lot of really cool things. I did a lot of business plans, business cases for clinical nutrition staffing, for commercial food services in the organizations. I did a completely redevelopment of menus in the cafeteria and for catering, very different things than what I had anticipated doing after undergrad. But it really provided me now with excellent experience in writing proposals, and now as a faculty member, that certainly helps with grant writing. So on the side, I was really lucky because I was at the hospital. I was able to continue working on my research project. So in the evenings, I would go up to the clinic, I would screen patients, and then, you know, leave a list. And I had a couple dietitians at the hospital who were helping me with that. So partway through that contract, a position came up in the ICU. So I started working as a 0.6 FTE in the ICU, and it was a dream job. It was, you know, a great team. I got to work. I loved the complexity of the patients. It's a lot of nutrition support, so enteral nutrition, TPN, lots of calculations. I got to teach residents. I got to teach nurses, and it was fabulous. At the same time, Gary Newton, my supervisor, was, we had a few conversations, and it was, my research project was really progressing. I was very interested in it, and sort of the little bug came in my ear. Well, what about you do a master's? And I never really considered a master's. At that time, it wasn't as common for dietitians to do masters. And so I enrolled part-time in the master's program in the department, and I continued working in the ICU. So I did that for 3 years. By the end of that period in 2007, when I was ready to defend my master's, actually probably about a year before, the bug came in my ear, oh, you should think about a PhD. So, you know, we had started writing grants, and while I was finishing up my master's, and so I was already thinking PhD, and the clinical work, I was done. I was actually realized, you know, I had done it for 3 years. I had sort of mastered it at a certain, you get to a certain level where you've reached, you've learned sort of as much as you can at that point, and I wasn't as happy with sort of the 9 to 5. I liked these like really challenging. I liked doing research. I liked the beginning of projects and the end of projects and the challenge that research offered, as opposed to a clinical caseload. That's just my own personality and what works for me. Also, I found working in the ICU, I didn't realize this until after I left, but emotionally, I'm a very sensitive person, and emotionally seeing people grieving for their families was really, took a big toll on me. And when I left, I felt so free. So that was, you know, the best decision in retrospect. So during that period, you know, up until 2011, I continued working at Mount Sinai Hospital. So my PhD was a clinically focused PhD. We did a variety of studies in patients with heart failure and hypertension. So we did studies like all the way in the physiology lab, looking at vascular function, vascular responses to different diets, all the way through to doing some foundational studies, looking at methods of dietary assessment in heart failure, and some epidemiologic studies, so linking dietary intake to acute heart failure decompensation and hospitalization. So this was really, you know, and my PhD was also co-supervised by Dr. JoAnne Arcand, who you may know. So it was really a time where I methodologically became very strong, very rigorous. The program at Mount Sinai in the cardiovascular lab where I was the only nutritionist. I worked, my colleagues were in pharmacology, PhDs in pharmacology. But we really sort of worked as a team and learned a lot about sort of the basics of science and being excellent scientists. And so from there, you know, I would say probably in 2010, about a year before I finished my my PhD, the bug was, oh, you should do a postdoc. So I was already kind of being groomed for the academic track, and there wasn't really anything else I wanted to do at that point. So I thought, why not? And so, you know, it's just, what's the next best decision? And so the next best thing for me was thinking about a postdoc. I actually accepted a postdoc initially at McMaster University in a big cardiovascular epidemiology lab, working with Andrew Mente and Salim Youssef. And then I was approached by Mary Labbe, who had just come from Health Canada just the year before. And she, as you may know, chaired Canada's sodium reduction strategy. I had expertise, so I just had 7 or 8 years studying dietary sodium. So Mary recruited me to her lab, and I very happily accepted. And so what I was able to do was bring my expertise in dietary sodium, cardiovascular disease, and then apply it to a series of studies during my postdoctoral fellowship, which under the supervision of Mary, which really focused on public health nutrition and policy. So I did a policy fellowship at the Dalawana School of Public Health for the first year, and then continued on doing research for a couple of more years. Most of my research during my postdoc focused on sodium reduction, so evaluating various elements of population-wide sodium reduction strategies. And this was really important at this time because work from Health Canada on this file had actually waned a little bit. So we were able to work with Health Canada and do some of the research that they could have been doing but weren't able to, and really help keep that file moving along. So I had so many wonderful opportunities during my postdoc. So much networking. I got to meet people from across the country who then, when I became a faculty member, became people that I called upon, or that actually became some mentors to me. I got to travel quite a bit. So I even was able to present to MPs at Parliament Hill when they were debating sodium reduction, when there's a private member's bill. I got to present to food industry, to work with food industry, to present to provincial governments, and it was really a wonderful opportunity. I also wrote a lot of grants during that time, and it was really a time, like your postdoctoral studies are really a time where you get to publish more, you get to supervise students. I got to be a sessional lecturer, and it was really a great time. So as I started finishing my postdoc, I started to applying for different jobs, and I only really applied for faculty positions because that was just the track I was on, and there wasn't really anything else that I was interested in. It seemed to be the next best choice for me. So I applied. The first faculty position I applied to, I got an interview. I was really lucky. And so I started as assistant professor in the Faculty of Health Sciences at Ontario Tech University in January of 2015. Has everybody heard of Ontario Tech here? Yeah? So it's a new university. It's the newest university, probably almost in Canada. And it's very quickly growing. So in 14 years, we already have probably close to 12,000 students, and we're constantly adding new buildings. We're a very young faculty, so the Faculty of Health Sciences, I think we probably have about 35 core faculty members, which are tenure track and teaching faculty, and it's very young. So you can imagine, they're recruiting new graduates from postdoctoral programs and PhD programs, and so on average our faculty is probably around the age of like early 40s, like the average age. So when you compare to, say, the Department of Nutritional Sciences, the demographic is really different, and we're of all different backgrounds. So I'm one of 2 nutritionists. We have a nursing program, a kinesiology program, and a health sciences program. So I fall under the health sciences program, but I actually teach nurses, health science students, and kinesiology students. So I feel like it's a very privileged position because I get to provide these other health professions with probably the only nutrition course that they will ever take. So it's really fun, and it's nice to be able to apply nutrition to various different disciplines. So I showed this picture. It's actually quite meaningful. This was taken on my very first day of my job. I sent it to my husband. I was like, look, I have my own office. But the really important thing here is to look at the empty shelves and the empty whiteboard. So you come to these positions with all this wonderful training and these wonderful networks and friends and colleagues. But really, at the end of the day, you're starting from scratch, and it is so daunting. And it's especially moving from, two downtown Toronto research-intensive centers to a new and upcoming university where you don't really know anybody. And it was really challenging, but it's very rewarding at the same time, because I was able to build this wonderful research program. So what exactly do I do? So sometimes, if you're an undergrad, you maybe don't get a sense of what your professors do. Like, they show up for 1 or 2 hours a week and teach you, and then they go home. It's actually, it's not really the case. It is the busiest job. It's actually more of a vocation than a job. It's 24/7 at certain periods of time. My position, typically faculty positions, are 40% research, 40% teaching, and 20% service. I've been really fortunate. I was awarded a National New Investigator Award from the Heart and Stroke Foundation, and what that, for me getting that award, what the university had to commit to giving me was 75% research time. So that meant that I don't have to teach as much, which is very important, because the teaching, like 40% equates to about 4 courses a year, which is a lot. So now I only teach 2 courses a year. But in terms of the research, you may be familiar with what a typical faculty member does or may not, but we essentially have to develop a research agenda. So what do we want to study? What is feasible within my funding and my environment and my network of colleagues? So, developing that research agenda and that research plan, some of which might be highly successful and some of which might not be. So, it's, I've been pretty lucky that I've been very fortunate to be able to successfully implement mine, but there's always like ebbs and flows within it. We have to write grants. Like, grant writing is a continuous cycle. Manuscript writing, supervision, and mentorship is huge. So when you first, I had the opportunity to mentor 4th-year students, but when you're actually supervising master's and PhD students, it's a much more close relationship, and there's always ebbs and flows and highlights and downtimes. And so really working to get the best out of people and help them achieve their best self is really, it's such a privilege to be able to do. Project management, I have so many things going on at one time. Collaboration, you have to be a good colleague, great interpersonal skills. Budget management, human resources, contracts, unions, we have to know the union structures for our TAs and RAs, and then thesis committees, which are fairly light on our load. But so that's what research entails. And then teaching, a lot of, some people don't have a lot of teaching experience. I'd only taught 1 course here at U of T before I started at Ontario Tech. So, developing skills in course design. I had to learn how to teach online. I had never done that before. And there's definitely an art to teaching online, and it took me a couple years to figure out how to do it effectively. Developing and delivering an assessment and supervising TAs. Most TAs are wonderful, but then what happens if they don't show up or don't, do what they're supposed to do? So there's always that sort of conflict resolution. Skills that we were never trained to do. You just sort of learn it as you go. And then service. So service is like committee work that we do. It's a really fun element. Some of it's fun, a lot of it's fun, some of it's not as fun. Like, some university committees are a bit dry, like a curriculum committee where you're just reviewing course syllabi and learning outcomes. But I do a lot of work with the Canadian Nutrition Society, lots of work with Hypertension Canada as a volunteer, but also on their clinical practice guidelines. So I'm the nutrition expert on their clinical practice guidelines, which does require reviews and work on a periodic basis annually. And then more recently, in the last couple years, I've started on grant review committees, so at the Heart and Stroke, and then this upcoming year I'll be working on CHR committees. So that's what service entails. It's a lot more than 5%, but it's actually a really nice way, especially being a nutrition focused faculty member in a very diverse health sciences faculty, it really helps me stay connected to the broader community and network and get to know other people, because at the end of the day, you know, the people working at Hypertension, other volunteers at Hypertension Canada or the Canadian Nutrition Society are going to be the people reviewing grants and manuscripts that you write and prepare. So that's a little bit about what I do. I just wanted to share briefly about what my research program actually ended up being. So as a very sort of broad statement to my research agenda, it's to research nutrition policies and programs at the population level and to evaluate interventions to support both individuals and clinicians and educators in reducing nutritional risk to improve cardiovascular health. So all of my work really has that cardiovascular undertone to it, because that's where a lot of my funding is coming from. And so, I have three themes to my research. So the first is really looking at adults, and that's really where we're testing novel interventions. So I've gotten really, moved really into the sort of implementation science, knowledge translation science side of things. So the premise being that we know what diets are healthy to help people, but we're not necessarily implementing them well, and people are not necessarily following some. So what supports can we do, particularly among high-risk patient groups, like people with hypertension and heart failure, to improve health outcomes? And then how can we better support healthcare providers in supporting patients? Because we know that healthcare providers have a very powerful role in facilitating, helping individuals facilitate behavior change. Then I'm still continuing some work at the population level, evaluating sodium reduction elements of Canada's and then now international sodium reduction strategies. And then finally, this new area that I've been working on is with kids. And I've worked with elderly people my whole life. I never imagined to work with children, but a new opportunity came my way a few years ago to work with a Canada Research Chair in the Faculty of Education at my school, who has expertise in education and technology. And she invited me to be part of this very big grant that was creating apps for kids in school. So knowing that digital tools like iPads, for example, are increasingly available in schools, but there's not a lot of evidence-based apps to support that. So I'm leading one of the main pillars of that grant, which is very large, from the Ontario government, and we've now created two apps. One that we collaborated with Health Canada to develop an app to teach kids about the new food guide. So we were able to get early access to the food guide to ensure that all of those key messages, the new messages, are built within it. And we've just finished one on physical activity. We actually figured out a way to use an app to get kids active in the classroom to implement DPA. And then we'll be starting our third app this summer, and it's going to be focused on nutrition, and the topic is still to be determined. But it'll probably focus on either the nutrition facts table or the mindfulness element of the Canada's Food Guide, which would be quite novel. So that's an overview of my program. These are my collaborators. Again, a lot of these relationships are developed through networking, many of whom I met during my postdoctoral studies or my PhD, and continue to build really strong relationships afterwards. I also partner with organizations. So these organizations support the research through the development of the research questions, as well as through to the dissemination. And then obviously various sources of funding. And then my students. So these are some of my students. They weren't all in the first photo, so I had to put the second one from Christmas with a few of the others. But you know, your students are collaborators, and I'm very lucky to have the most wonderful students at Ontario Tech, and we have so much fun, and it's really great. So in terms of some personal attributes that that I think really sort of make you need to have as an academic, I just wanted to share some of the things. So it's a lot of work. There's definitely benefits, but it's a 7-day-a-week job typically. It ebbs and flows. There are some periods of time that are incredibly intense. You have to have a very strong work ethic and really like a drive, a passion for what you do, a natural curiosity, and perseverance and tenacity. I mean, no research, anybody in here has conducted research, it never always goes 100% as planned. And so to have that drive, the creativity to overcome challenges, the foresight to anticipate the risks that might occur and to implement strategies to prevent those from happening are really important. Really having a growth mindset is very important. And I think that's true for really any job in today's age. You know, being willing to learn from your mistakes, to take criticisms, especially early in training. Like, I remember getting drafts of my literature reviews back and they were just read, you know, and that's just the game. Like, it's just the way, that's just training. But not to take it personally and to really sort of work through it, work through those criticisms. Embrace challenges. Academia is really competitive, and it can be really easy to look at other people's successes and feel like, oh, I'm never going to get there, or feel maybe threatened by them. But I think it's really important to be able to look at other people's successes as a way of being inspired and to say, okay, well, they can do that and I can do something different. I have different success, I have different strengths, and I want to be at that level as well. And then being vulnerable enough to risk failing. So a lot of the things that we say yes to, maybe they don't work out. Like, a really good example is I did a debate at the Canadian Nutrition Society meeting last year on sodium, and I was so stressed about it, and I didn't want to do it. I tried to pass it off to other people. But other people kept saying, no, you're doing it. You're the best person to do this. So it was really a stressful time, but I grew so much from just that experience, and I'm very happy that I took that risk, just as an example, and to really do that in any area of life or in any type of career. So thank you.